The storage unit door stood in front of her like a vault, holding the last pieces of a man she thought she knew. Jennifer Hayes clutched the key so tight it bit into her palm. $85. That's what it cost to buy back her own husband's secrets. 6 months ago she'd buried David. Now she stood alone at dawn, staring at a padlock that shouldn't exist. Inside that 10 by 10 metal box, she'd find more than old tools and forgotten memories. She'd find a diagnosis he'd hidden, a father he'd claimed was dead, a house half built in the woods, and a truth that would either destroy her or set her free. She turned the key. The storage unit door stood in front of her like a vault, holding the last pieces of a man she thought she knew. Jennifer Hayes clutched the key so tight it bit into her palm. Her other hand gripped a crumpled auction receipt. $85. That's what it cost to buy back her own husband's secrets. Dawn light barely touched the rows of rusted metal doors at Sagebrush Storage. The air smelled like oil and dust, and something older, abandonment. Her breath came out in small clouds. Even though it wasn't that cold, she was trembling anyway. 6 months ago, she'd stood in a black dress, holding Lily's hand while they lowered David into the ground. Her daughter's small fingers had squeezed so hard they left marks. Jennifer remembered thinking, "This is the worst day. Nothing can be worse than this." She'd been wrong. The auctioneer's voice still echoed in her head. Unit 247 belongs to David Hayes, deceased, payment defaulted, sold to highest bidder. She'd been the only one there. Just her and a bored teenager playing on his phone. Now she stood alone in the grey morning, staring at a padlock that shouldn't exist. David had never mentioned storage. They'd told each other everything, or she thought they had. She touched the lock, and her sleeve pulled back. His watch, too big for her wrist, caught the light. She hadn't taken it off since the funeral. A memory surfaced, sharp as broken glass. David's voice in their kitchen, 2 years ago, holding a box of their daughter's baby clothes. "Some things are worth keeping, Jen, even if they hurt to hold." She'd found the storage bill hidden in his workshop, dated 2 weeks before the accident, before the scaffolding collapsed, before her world did. Why? The key slid into the lock. It turned with a click that sounded too loud in the silence. Her hand found the door handle. Whatever was inside would either heal her or break her completely. She chose to find out. But before we see what Jennifer discovered, hit that subscribe button. Because this story will change how you think about love, loss, and the things we hide from the people we love most. Jennifer Hayes used to be a teacher. She'd spent 12 years shaping young minds in a third-grade classroom that smelled like crayons and hope. But that was before the accident. Before the bills started piling up faster than she could count them. Now she worked double shifts at Morrison's grocery, scanning barcodes until her wrists ached and her feet went numb. The house felt too big without David, too quiet. Lily tried to fill the silence with chatter about school and friends, but sometimes Jennifer caught her daughter just staring at the empty chair at the dinner table. The one where David used to sit, sketching building plans on napkins while he ate. David had been a carpenter. The kind who built things that lasted. Bookshelves that didn't wobble. A garden arbor that still stood in their backyard, covered in roses he'd never see bloom again. He died 6 months ago, when a scaffolding collapsed on a job site. Instant, the foreman said, like that was supposed to help. Jennifer had been cleaning out his workshop last week when she found it. A bill for Sagebrush Storage, tucked inside his toolbox between a level and a measuring tape. Unit 247, paid through December. She'd stood there, holding the paper, hands shaking. They'd lived in a house with a 2-car garage and a shed. Why would he need storage? The bill was dated 2 weeks before he died. The month after, payments stopped. 3 months later, the facility sent a notice. Final warning before auction. She'd almost let it go. Almost. But something stopped her. A need she couldn't name. a pull toward the last mystery David had left behind. The auction was held in a cramped office that smelled like burnt coffee. She'd sat in a plastic chair, clutching her purse, while a bored auctioneer rattled through units. Unit 247. David Hayes, deceased. Payment defaulted. Opening bid, $100. No one raised a hand. 75? Silence. Jennifer's voice came out smaller than she intended. 85. The auctioneer looked relieved. Sold. She'd used money saved for Lily's winter coat. Guilt twisted in her stomach, but she couldn't stop now. That night, she'd pulled out David's measuring tape, the one he'd used on every job. It was covered in pencil marks and dates she didn't understand. She'd run her fingers over the worn metal, trying to feel close to him again. Now, standing in front of Unit 247, she pressed her thumb against his watch on her wrist. "Help me understand," she whispered. She lifted the door. It rolled up with a screech that echoed off concrete and sky. Inside was darkness and the smell of sawdust. The smell of David. She stepped forward into the unknown. The inside of the storage unit looked nothing like she'd imagined. Jennifer had expected chaos. Boxes thrown together, tools rusting in corners, the debris of a life interrupted. Instead, she found order. The space was 10 by 10, maybe a little bigger. Every box was labelled in David's careful handwriting. Wooden crates lined one wall, stacked with precision. Plastic bins sat on metal shelving, arranged by size and date. It looked less like storage and more like an archive. She stepped inside, and the smell hit her all at once. Sawdust, old paper, and underneath it all, faint but unmistakable, his cologne, the cheap drugstore kind he'd worn every day since college. Her knees went weak. She steadied herself against a stack of boxes, hand pressed to her mouth. 6 months. It had been 6 months, and here he was, still lingering in the air like he'd just stepped out for coffee. Get it together, she told herself. She set down her flashlight and the measuring tape she'd brought from home. The tape unrolled slightly on the concrete floor, its pencil marks catching the dim overhead light. Jennifer wiped her eyes and forced herself to focus. The first box she opened was labelled Foundation, 2011. Inside were photographs, hundreds of them, organised in plastic sleeves. She pulled one out, a house mid-renovation, walls stripped down to studs, new beams going in. On the back, in David's handwriting, Martinez family. New foundation poured August 2011, 3 kids. Rosa cried when she saw the kitchen. Jennifer frowned. She remembered the Martinez family, neighbours from their old street. David had done some work for them, but she didn't know he'd documented it like this. She pulled out another photo. Different house, different family. Chen family, roof repair, April 2013. Mr. Chen said it was the first time in 5 years he didn't worry about rain. Another. Each one labelled with names, dates, and little notes about the people who lived there. Why would David keep all of this? She moved to the next box. This one was labelled Letters, read when ready. Inside, sealed envelopes. Dozens of them, each addressed to different people in David's handwriting. Mrs. O'Brien, the Ramirez family, Father Michael at Street Ann's. Her hand hovered over one envelope near the bottom. To Jennifer, open first. She stared at it, the handwriting blurred as her eyes filled. Not yet. She couldn't. Not yet. She set the box aside and kept searching. On a shelf near the back, she found journals, spiral-bound notebooks, their covers worn from use. She opened one at random, dated 2015. David's handwriting filled every page. Measurements, materials lists, cost calculations, but also something else. The 14th of June 2015. Finished the wheelchair ramp for the Johnsons today. Mrs. Johnson hugged me so hard I thought she'd crack a rib. She said her son could finally come home from the care facility. I told her it was just wood and screws. She said it was a miracle. Jennifer turned the page. The 3rd of July, 2015. The Patel family's basement flooded last week. Insurance won't cover it. I'm going back tomorrow with a sump pump and some waterproofing. They don't know yet. Sometimes, the best gifts are the ones people don't ask for. Her chest tightened. These weren't just work logs. They were stories, pieces of people's lives that David had carried with him. She kept reading, flipping through months and years of entries. Each one the same: a family helped, a problem solved, a moment of gratitude. How had she not known about this? She moved deeper into the unit. In the far corner, covered with a white sheet, was something tall and angular. Jennifer pulled the sheet away. A mannequin. Draped over it was a wedding dress. Not hers, this one was vintage. Ivory silk with delicate lace sleeves, beautifully preserved. A small card was pinned to the bodice, for Lily, when she's ready, from her grandmother. Jennifer's breath caught. David's mother had died when he was young. He barely spoke about her. But here was her dress, saved all these years, waiting for a granddaughter she'd never meet. Tears came fast and hot. Jennifer sank onto the concrete floor, surrounded by boxes and memories, and a husband she was only beginning to understand. Time passed. She didn't know how long. Eventually, she stood, wiped her face, forced herself to keep looking. That's when she noticed the filing cabinet in the corner. Small, olive green, industrial. She tried the drawers. Locked. She pulled out her keyring, the one with David's old workshop keys, and tried each one. None of them fit. Frustration rose in her throat. What else had he locked away? What else didn't she know? She turned back to the unit, scanning for anything she'd missed. Her eyes landed on the wall opposite the door. Photos, dozens of them, tacked up like a collage. But they weren't random. They were connected by strings, red yarn running from image to image like a detective's evidence board. But these weren't crimes. They were families, homes, faces, smiling in front of porches and kitchens and gardens. Jennifer stepped closer. At the center of it all was a photo she recognized instantly. Her, David, and Lily. 2 years ago, at the beach, Lily building a sandcastle. David's arm around Jennifer's shoulders, both of them laughing. She'd taken that photo herself, asking a stranger to snap it before the sun went down. Beside it, in David's handwriting, "Everything I build is for them." Her hand rose to the photo, fingers trembling. "David," she whispered, "what were you doing?" She traced the yarn connections. Each photo linked to another. Families connected to projects. Projects connected to dates. Dates connected to notes written on index cards. One card caught her eye. June 2022. Diagnosis confirmed. Limited time. Must finish what I started. Diagnosis? Jennifer's heart stopped. She yanked the card off the wall, read it again. Diagnosis. Limited time. What diagnosis? She tore through the unit now, frantic, pulling open boxes, scanning labels, looking for anything that explained those 3 words. That's when she saw it. A small metal lockbox tucked behind the journals, almost hidden. No label, no lock, just a simple latch. She opened it. Inside, a single photograph and a folded piece of paper. The photograph was of David, recent, maybe a year old. He was standing in front of a plot of land trees in the background, stakes in the ground marking boundaries. He looked thinner than she remembered, tired, but he was smiling. She turned it over. For Jennifer and Lily, the last build. Her hands shook as she unfolded the paper. It was a property deed. 5 acres, registered in her name, transferred 6 months before David died. She stared at the address. somewhere outside town. She'd never heard of it. Why would David buy land without telling her? And what did he mean by the last build? Jennifer looked around the unit at the photographs, the journals, the locked cabinet, the wedding dress, waiting for a daughter who didn't know it existed. Everything in this space was a question, and she had no answers. But she knew one thing now. David had been keeping secrets, big ones. And whatever they were, they'd been important enough to hide for years. Jennifer sat on the cold concrete floor, staring at the property deed until the words blurred. 5 acres, in her name, transferred 7 months ago. How had she not known? She thought back to that time. Last summer, David had been working long hours, coming home late, covered in sawdust and sweat. She'd assumed it was just another job. Another project that needed finishing before winter. He'd never mentioned buying land. Her hands shook as she refolded the deed and slipped it into her jacket pocket. The letter, the one addressed to her. She couldn't avoid it anymore. Jennifer crossed to the box, labelled Letters, read when ready, and pulled out the envelope with her name on it. The seal broke easily under her thumb. Inside, 3 pages, handwritten, David's careful script filling every line. She took a breath and began to read. Jen, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I'm sorry for the secrets. I'm sorry for the distance you must have felt these last 2 years. But I need you to understand why I did this. The storage unit was my project archive. Every family I helped, every home I built or repaired. I kept it all here because I needed proof that a life could be measured in more than money or years. But that's not the whole truth. There's something I never told you, something I should have said the day I found out, but I couldn't. I was a coward, Jen. I thought I was protecting you. Maybe I was just protecting myself. Jennifer's chest tightened. She forced herself to keep reading. 2 years ago, I started feeling weak. Little things at first. Dropping tools, stumbling on job sites. I told myself I was just tired, getting older. But it got worse. By the time I saw a doctor, they had a name for it. ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. Progressive, terminal, no cure. The page slipped from her fingers. ALS. The word hung in the air like smoke. David had been sick, dying, and he'd never told her. She picked up the letter with trembling hands and kept reading. They gave me 3 to 5 years, maybe less. I thought about telling you that night. I drove home with the diagnosis in my pocket, walked through the door, and saw you making dinner. Lily was doing homework at the table. You were both laughing about something, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't break that moment. So, I made a choice. I decided to spend my last good years building, not dying. I started documenting every project, every family I could help. I wanted to leave something behind that mattered more than medical bills and hospital rooms. The property, the 5 acres, that's for you and Lily. I started building there, a house, a workshop, a place where you could heal when I was gone. I'm sorry I didn't finish it. I ran out of time. Check the filing cabinet. The key is taped under the measuring tape holder. Inside, you'll find everything. Medical records, financial planning, and the real reason I kept it all hidden. I love you, Jen. I always have. I always will. Forgive me for not being brave enough to say goodbye. David. 2. Jennifer couldn't breathe. The storage unit tilted around her. She pressed her palms to the concrete, trying to steady herself. ALS. He'd been sick for 2 years, dying, and she'd had no idea. She thought back to those months, the way he'd started gripping railings when he climbed stairs, the way he'd stopped playing catch with Lily, the way he'd kissed her forehead every night before bed, like he was memorizing the feeling. How had she missed it? Tears came hot and fast. She buried her face in her hands and sobbed loud, gasping sounds that echoed off the metal walls. He'd lied to her. For 2 years, he'd carried this alone, and she'd never known. Time passed. She didn't know how long. Finally, she wiped her face and stood. Her legs felt like water. The filing cabinet. She crossed to it, found David's measuring tape where she'd set it down earlier. She turned it over. There, taped to the metal case, a small key. Her hands shook as she peeled it free. The lock turned easily. Inside, the cabinet was packed with files. Medical records, hospital invoices, insurance documents. She pulled out the first folder. Neurologist appointment. June 2022. Diagnosis: amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Another file. Treatment options. Clinical trials. Experimental drugs. And then, a page that made her stomach drop. Cost estimates. Treatment: $180,000, $250,000 annually. Life expectancy with treatment: 4 to 6 years. Life expectancy without: 3 to 5 years. Beneath it, a handwritten note in David's writing: not worth bankrupting my family for 6 extra months. Jennifer's vision blurred. He'd chosen to die rather than leave them in debt. She kept digging. Another folder. Life insurance policy, carefully structured to pay out despite his diagnosis. Double indemnity for accidental death. The scaffolding. Her breath caught. The accident hadn't been an accident, had it? No. She pushed the thought away. David wouldn't. He couldn't. But the doubt lingered. She found another document. A trust fund, established 18 months ago. Beneficiary: Lily Hayes, funded by redirected treatment costs. He'd taken the money that could have saved him and given it to their daughter instead. Jennifer sank into the chair beside the cabinet, overwhelmed. At the bottom of the drawer, she found something else. A box of mini DV tapes, 8 of them, each labelled with a date, and a small camcorder, old but functional, plugged into a portable TV in the corner. Of course, David would have this set up. She loaded the first tape, dated 16 months ago. The screen flickered. Then, David's face appeared. He was in his workshop, thinner than she remembered, tired, but smiling. "Hey, Jen." His voice broke her. "If you're watching this, you know now. I'm sorry I didn't tell you, but I need you to hear this from me. Not from a doctor, not from a piece of paper." He took a breath. "I'm sick, and I'm not going to get better, but I've made peace with it, because every day I wake up, I get to love you. I get to watch Lily grow. I get to build something that lasts." He smiled, and it was so real, so David, that Jennifer's heart shattered. "That's enough, Jen. That's more than enough." The tape ended. She sat in silence, staring at the blank screen. Then she loaded the next tape. This one showed David at a job site, teaching a teenage boy how to use a miter saw, talking about angles and precision, and the importance of doing things right the first time. "You see this?" David said to the kid. "This isn't just wood. It's someone's home, someone's future. When you build something, you're building trust. You're saying, I care about your life. That matters more than money, more than anything." Jennifer watched tape after tape. David building a wheelchair ramp for an elderly veteran. David repairing a roof for a single mother with 3 kids. David teaching Lily how to hammer a nail, his hand guiding hers, both of them laughing when she hit her thumb. He'd been documenting everything, not for himself, for her, for Lily. So they'd remember him as he was, not as he would have become. The last tape was labelled simply, "Final Message." Jennifer hesitated, then pressed play. David appeared on screen. This time, he looked different, gaunt, exhausted, but his eyes were clear. "Jen, if you've made it this far, I need to tell you one more thing, something I've been too ashamed to admit." He paused, gathering himself. "I'm not the only one who's been keeping secrets." Jennifer's blood went cold. "My father, Robert Hayes, He's alive, Jen. I told you he died when I was a kid, but that was a lie. He left us. Walked away when I was 12, right before we lost the house. I never forgave him. Jennifer stared at the screen, unable to process. But 3 years ago, he found me, wanted to make amends, wanted to be part of Lily's life. I told him no, told him he lost that right. David's jaw tightened. But then I got sick. And I realized I was doing the same thing to Lily that he did to me, cutting her off from family because of my pride. He leaned closer to the camera. Robert helped me, Jen. He funded the property, the materials for the house, the trust for Lily. He did it without asking for anything in return. Just a chance to meet his granddaughter before I died. Jennifer's hands gripped the edge of the table. I was going to tell you. I was going to introduce you. But then the diagnosis got worse, and I ran out of time. So I'm asking you now, please, let him finish what we started. Let him be part of Lily's life. He's not perfect, but he's trying, and that's more than I ever gave him credit for. The tape ended. Jennifer sat frozen. David's father was alive. And he'd been funding everything. The property, the house, the legacy David had been building. All of it tied to a man Jennifer had never met, a man David had lied about for their entire marriage. She wanted to scream, to throw something, to demand answers from a husband who couldn't give them. Instead, she grabbed the property deed from her pocket and stared at the address. She needed to see it. Whatever David and his father had built, she needed to see it with her own eyes. Because right now, she didn't know what was real anymore. Jennifer drove to the property alone. She'd left Lily with Mrs. Chen next door, told her she had errands to run. She couldn't bring her daughter into this. Not yet. Not until she understood what David had built, or tried to. The address led her east, past the last gas station, past the turnoff where cell service dropped to nothing, 40 minutes of winding roads through pine forests that blocked out the sky. Finally, a gravel driveway, no mailbox, no sign, just tire tracks disappearing into the trees. She turned in. The road curved for half a mile before opening into a clearing. And there it was. The house? Except it wasn't finished. Jennifer stopped the car and stared. The frame stood skeletal against the grey sky. 2 stories, maybe 3. Wooden beams rising like ribs. Walls half-sheathed in plywood. Windows without glass. A roof that ended halfway across. It looked like someone had stopped mid-sentence. She got out slowly. The wind cut through the trees, cold and sharp. Around the frame, she saw evidence of work. Stacks of lumber under tarps, pallets of shingles, tools arranged neatly on a makeshift bench, a generator covered in moss. Everything waiting. Jennifer walked toward the structure, boots crunching on gravel and dead leaves. Up close, she could see the craftsmanship. The joints were precise, the beams perfectly level. This wasn't amateur work. This was David. She stepped inside what would have been the front door. The interior was open, no walls yet, just studs marking where rooms would go. She could see the layout in her mind. Living room here, kitchen there, stairs leading up to bedrooms. On the floor, someone had left blueprints weighted down by stones. She picked one up. David's handwriting filled the margins. Master bedroom, east facing. Jen loves morning light. Lily's room, window seat for reading. She'll need that. Workshop, separate entrance, room to grow. Her throat tightened. He'd been planning their future. Every detail thought through, every room designed around the people he loved. And he'd run out of time. She heard a sound behind her boots on gravel. Jennifer spun around. A man stood at the edge of the clearing. Late 60s, maybe 70. Grey hair, weathered face, wearing a work jacket and jeans. He held a toolbox in one hand. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he set down the toolbox. "You're Jennifer." It wasn't a question. Her heart hammered. Who are you? But she already knew. The eyes, the way he stood, the angle of his jaw. Robert Hayes, he said quietly, David's father. She'd imagined this moment 100 times on the drive here. Imagined yelling at him, demanding answers, blaming him for every lie David had told. But standing here, seeing him in person, all she felt was tired. You've been here, she said, working on this. He nodded. Every weekend since David died, trying to finish what we started. Why? It is because I owe him, because he gave me a chance I didn't deserve. Robert stepped closer, slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. And because he asked me to. Jennifer's hands curled into fists. He lied to me about you. For 12 years. I know. He said you were dead. I might as well have been. Robert's voice was rough. I left him when he was a kid. Walked away when he needed me most. I don't get to ask for forgiveness. I know that. Then what are you doing here? He looked up at the unfinished house. Trying to be the grandfather I should have been. The father I never was. David gave me that chance. I'm not wasting it. Jennifer wanted to hate him, wanted to tell him to leave and never come back. But she couldn't. Because she saw it in his face, the same guilt she'd been carrying since she opened that letter. The weight of not knowing, of missing the signs, of failing someone you loved. Did you know, she asked, about the ALS? Not at first. He told me a year ago, said he didn't have much time left. Robert's voice cracked. I offered to pay for treatment, the best doctors, experimental trials. Whatever it took. And? He refused, said he'd already made his choice. Said he'd rather leave you and Lily something solid than medical bills and false hope. Jennifer's vision blurred. He was an idiot. He was trying to protect you. By lying, by dying alone? Robert was quiet for a moment. Then he said, he wasn't alone, not completely. Something in his tone made her look up. I was there, Robert said, the day he died, at the job site. Jennifer's blood went cold. What? He called me that morning, said he needed to talk, needed help with something. I drove out, and we met at the site before the crew arrived. Robert's hands shook. He told me he was getting weaker, that he couldn't feel his hands anymore, that he was afraid he'd drop something, hurt someone. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve the truth. Robert met her eyes. The scaffolding collapse, it wasn't an accident, Jennifer. Not completely. Her stomach dropped. What are you? David knew it was unstable. The foreman had flagged it the day before, but David insisted on going up anyway. He said he needed to check the measurements one more time. Jennifer couldn't breathe. I tried to stop him, Robert said, voice breaking. Told him to let someone else do it, but he just smiled at me and said, some things you have to finish yourself. The clearing tilted around her. I think he knew. Robert whispered, I think he chose the scaffolding because it would look like an accident, because the insurance would pay double, because you and Lily would be taken care of. Jennifer's knees buckled. She sat down hard on the plywood floor. David hadn't just kept secrets. He'd planned his own death. No. The word came out strangled. He wouldn't. He couldn't. I don't know for sure, Robert said. Maybe it really was an accident. Maybe I'm just trying to make sense of something that doesn't make sense. But Jennifer knew. Deep down, she knew. The insurance policy, the careful planning, the way he'd said goodbye without saying goodbye. David had loved them too much to become a burden. So he'd chosen the scaffolding, chosen to fall, chosen to leave them with a future instead of debt. I should have stopped him, Robert said, tears streaming down his weathered face. I should have. Stop, Jennifer's voice was sharp. She stood, wiping her eyes. You couldn't have stopped him. I couldn't have stopped him. When David made up his mind, that was it. She looked around the unfinished house. At the blueprints. At the careful measurements. at the life he'd tried to build and never got to see. He wanted this finished, she said quietly, for me and Lily. He did. And you've been trying to finish it. Alone. Robert nodded. Jennifer took a deep breath. Her hands found David's measuring tape in her pocket. She'd brought it without thinking. She pulled it out, ran her thumb over the worn metal. The pencil marks, the dates, the initials of families he'd helped. Near the end, his handwriting, J.H. plus L.H., the last build. She'd thought it meant he was building something for them. But maybe it meant something else. Maybe it meant they were supposed to finish it, together. She looked at Robert. Can it be done? Can this house be finished? With help, yes. It'll take time, money, but the foundation is solid. David made sure of that. Jennifer stared at the skeleton of beams and dreams. She could walk away, sell the property, take the insurance money, and leave all of this behind. Or she could stay. She could finish what David started. She could turn his sacrifice into something real. But there was one problem. She didn't know if she could forgive him. For lying, for planning, for choosing to die instead of fight, for loving them so much it killed him. I need time, she said finally. I need to think. Robert nodded. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. Jennifer walked back to her car, the measuring tape still in her hand. As she drove away, she looked in the rearview mirror. Robert stood in the clearing, small and alone, surrounded by the ghost of a house that might never be finished. She thought about David's letter, his videos, his journals full of families helped and promises kept. She thought about the lies and the truth, and the blurry line between protecting someone and betraying them. And she thought about one thing Robert had said that wouldn't leave her alone. He wasn't alone, not completely. If Robert had been there the day David died, if he'd tried to stop him, then maybe there was more to the story. Maybe David's death wasn't as simple as sacrifice or suicide or accident. Maybe there was something else Robert wasn't saying. She pulled over on the side of the empty road and grabbed her phone. No service. She needed answers, real ones. She needed to know what happened on that scaffolding. Because if David had chosen to die, if he'd orchestrated his own death for insurance money, then everything she thought she knew about him, about their marriage, was a lie. But if he hadn't, if there was something else, then maybe she could find a way to forgive him. She looked down at the measuring tape in her lap, and for the first time she noticed something she'd missed before. At the very end of the tape, past all the other marks, was one more. Fresh, recent, written in different handwriting. R.H. 2024. Forgiveness is a house you build one nail at a time. Robert had been using David's measuring tape, adding his own mark to the legacy. Jennifer's breath caught. She didn't know what to believe anymore. But she knew one thing. She needed to go back to that storage unit. Because there was one box she hadn't opened yet. One letter she hadn't read. And maybe, just maybe, it held the answer to everything. Jennifer drove straight back to the storage unit. Her hands gripped the wheel so tight her knuckles went white. The measuring tape sat in the passenger seat, Robert's mark still fresh on the metal. Forgiveness is a house you build one nail at a time. She needed answers, real ones. The storage facility was nearly empty when she arrived. Just a few cars scattered across the lot. She parked in front of Unit 247 and unlocked it with shaking hands. Inside, everything looked the same. Boxes stacked neatly, journals lined up on shelves, the photo wall still watching her with 100 faces. But there was one thing she'd missed. One box she'd been too afraid to open. It sat on the highest shelf, pushed to the back, almost hidden, labelled in David's handwriting, "For Jennifer, when you're ready to forgive me." She pulled it down carefully. It was heavier than she expected. She set it on the floor, took a breath, and opened it. Inside, another videotape, a small wooden box, and a sealed letter with her name written across it in David's careful script. She loaded the tape first. The screen flickered to life. David appeared. But this wasn't like the other videos. He wasn't in his workshop or at a job site. He was sitting in the storage unit, right here, in this exact spot. And he looked directly at the camera, like he was looking at her. Jen, if you're watching this, it means you found everything. The property, the house, my father. He paused, gathering himself. And I'm guessing you're angry. You should be. I lied to you for 2 years. I kept secrets that should have been shared. I made choices without you. And I'm sorry. His eyes were wet. But I need you to understand something. The scaffolding, what happened that day, it wasn't what you think. Jennifer's breath caught. I know what it looked like. I know Robert probably told you I chose to go up there, that I knew it was unstable. And yeah, I did know. The foreman had flagged it. He leaned closer to the camera. But I didn't go up there to die, Jen. I went up there to live. She stared at the screen, not understanding. I was losing control of my hands. My balance was getting worse every day. I knew it was only a matter of time before I couldn't work anymore. Before I couldn't hold a hammer, or stand on a ladder, or do the thing I loved most. His voice broke. I was terrified, not of dying, of becoming helpless, of watching you take care of me while I forgot how to speak or breathe or move, of Lily remembering me as something broken. Tears streamed down his face. So that morning, I made a choice. I went up that scaffolding because I needed to prove to myself I could still do it. That I was still me, still a carpenter, still a father, still your husband. He wiped his eyes. I didn't go up there to fall, Jen. I went up there to finish one last measurement, one last perfect cut, one last thing I could build with my own hands before the disease took that away from me. Jennifer's hand covered her mouth. The scaffolding gave way. It was an accident, a real one, and in that moment, as I fell, I wasn't thinking about insurance or money or protecting you from debt. His smile was sad and small. I was thinking about how lucky I was, that I got to die doing what I loved, that I got to leave while I was still whole, that you and Lily would remember me as the man who built things, not the man who couldn't. He looked directly into the camera. I didn't choose to die, Jen, but if I had to go, I'm glad it was like that. Quick, clean, building something instead of wasting away. He took a shaky breath. Robert tried to stop me, begged me not to go up, but I told him, some things you have to finish yourself. I meant the measurement, the cut, the work. He paused. I didn't know those would be my last words. Jennifer sobbed, pressing her hand to the screen. I need you to know something else. The house, our house, it's not finished, and that's okay. Because I built it with a foundation strong enough to last. Strong enough for you and Lily to build on top of. He smiled through his tears. You don't need me to finish it, Jen. You never did. But if you want help, Robert is there. He's not perfect. He's made mistakes, but he's trying. And that's all any of us can do. He looked down, then back up. I love you. I loved you the day I met you. I loved you the day I found out I was dying. And I love you now, wherever I am, watching you be the strongest person I've ever known. The screen went black. Jennifer sat in silence, tears dripping onto her lap. He hadn't chosen to die. He'd chosen to live, one last time. With trembling hands, she opened the wooden box. Inside, David's wedding ring, the one she'd buried him with. No, not his ring, a second ring, identical to the one he'd worn. Beneath it, a note. I had 2 made, one to wear, one to give you when you were ready. Wear it or don't, but know that I'm still with you, always. She slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Then she opened the final letter. Jen, I know you're probably wondering why I documented everything, why I saved every photo, every journal entry, every story of the families I helped. It's because I needed proof. Not for me. For you. I needed you to see that my life wasn't measured in years. It was measured in moments, in wheelchair ramps and repaired roofs and kitchens rebuilt, in little girls who got to come home, in families who didn't lose everything. I needed you to see that even though I'm gone, the things I built are still standing. And the greatest thing I ever built was our life together. The house on the property, it's not just wood and nails, it's a promise that even when I'm not there, you and Lily have a foundation, something solid, something that lasts. But here's the secret, Jen. You were always the builder, not me. You built a home out of a tiny apartment. You built hope out of double shifts and empty pockets. You built our daughter into someone kind and brave and strong. I just tried to keep up. So finish the house, or don't. Sell it. Walk away. Whatever you choose, it'll be the right choice. Because you've never made a wrong one when it comes to the people you love. And if you do finish it, add your own mark to the measuring tape. Let Lily add hers. Let Robert add his. Because legacy isn't something one person builds alone. It's something we build together, one nail at a time. I love you, Jennifer Hayes, and I always will. David. Jennifer folded the letter carefully and pressed it to her chest. Around her, the storage unit felt different now, not like a tomb, like a workshop. A place where David had built one last thing before he died. Not a house. A map. A map back to herself, back to hope, back to the truth that love doesn't end when we do. She looked at the measuring tape on the floor beside her. The pencil marks, the dates, the initials of families helped. And at the very end, space for more. Space for her. Space for Lily. Space for Robert. Space for everyone who came after. She picked it up and held it in both hands. Then she whispered, "Thank you, David, for everything." And for the first time since he died, she believed that everything was going to be okay. Jennifer brought Lily to the property on a Saturday morning. The sky was clear for the first time in weeks. Sunlight cut through the trees, turning the clearing gold. Robert was already there, unloading lumber from his truck. When he saw them, he stopped, his face uncertain. Jennifer stepped out of the car, then opened the back door for Lily. Her daughter climbed out slowly, clutching her stuffed bear, the one David had made for her 3rd birthday. "Mom?" Lily's voice was small. "Where are we?" Jennifer knelt down to her level. "This is the place your dad was building. For us." Lily looked at the skeletal frame rising from the earth. "It looks sad." "It does," Jennifer agreed, "but I think we can fix that." She stood and took Lily's hand, walking toward Robert. He set down the lumber and wiped his hands on his jeans. "Jennifer, I wasn't sure you'd come back." "I wasn't either." She paused. "But I watched the rest of David's videos. I read his last letter." Robert's expression shifted. And I understand now what he was trying to do, what you've been trying to do." She took a breath. "Lily, there's someone I want you to meet." Lily stepped forward cautiously. Jennifer placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "This is your grandfather, your dad's father." Robert's eyes filled. He knelt down, just like Jennifer had, so he was at Lily's height. "Hi, Lily," he said quietly. "Your dad told me a lot about you." Lily studied him with serious eyes. "Are you the one who's been fixing this?" He nodded, trying to. "Your dad and I started it together, but I can't finish it alone." 2. "Why not?" "Because it's not just my house. It's yours, and your mum's, and it needs all of us to make it right." Lily considered this. Then she asked, "Did my dad like you?" Robert's smile was sad. "I think he was starting to, near the end." "Then I'll try to like you too." It was the simplest forgiveness Jennifer had ever witnessed. Robert's shoulders shook, and he wiped his eyes quickly. "Thank you." Over the next 3 months, they worked. Jennifer quit the grocery store and took out a small loan against the insurance money. She hired a crew of local contractors who'd known David, who wanted to help finish what he'd started. But the three of them did most of the work themselves. Robert taught Jennifer how to frame walls, how to read a level, how to drive nails straight and true. Lily helped measure boards, hold tools, paint trim in careful strokes. Every weekend, they came to the property, rain or shine. And slowly, the house took shape. Walls went up, windows went in. The roof stretched across the skeleton, turning bones into shelter. One afternoon, while they were installing the kitchen cabinets, Lily asked, "Mom, why did Dad keep it a secret?" Jennifer set down her drill. She'd been expecting this question. Because he wanted to protect us. He thought if we knew he was sick, we'd be scared or sad all the time. Were you mad when you found out? At first, yeah, I was really mad. Jennifer sat beside her daughter on the unfinished floor. But then I realized something. Your dad spent his whole life building things for other people. And the last thing he built was a future for us, even though he wouldn't be in it. Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I wish he was here." "Me too, baby, every day." They sat together in the half-finished kitchen, surrounded by sawdust and sunlight. On the last day of construction, Jennifer, Lily, and Robert stood on the front porch. The house was finished. 2 stories, east-facing windows in the master bedroom, a window seat in Lily's room, a workshop with a separate entrance. Everything David had planned. Jennifer reached into her pocket and pulled out the measuring tape. She'd brought it every single day, used it on every measurement, let it guide them the way David had guided so many others. Now, she unrolled it one last time. The marks were still there. Martinez family, Chen family, Patel family, all the lives David had touched. And at the end, Robert's mark. Forgiveness is a house you build one nail at a time. Jennifer pulled out a pencil. She added her own mark, slow and careful. J. H. 2024. Home. Then she handed the pencil to Lily. "Your turn, sweetheart." Lily took it seriously. She wrote in her best handwriting, L.H. 2024, for Dad. The three of them stood looking at the tape 3 generations, 3 marks, 1 legacy. "What do we do with it now?" Lily asked. Jennifer smiled. "We hang it in the workshop, and we keep using it every time we help someone else, every time we build something that matters." Robert's voice was rough. David would have liked that. "Yeah," Jennifer said. "He would have." That night, after Lily was asleep in her new room with the window seat, Jennifer stood in the kitchen. Their kitchen. She looked down at her hand. David's ring, the second one he'd made, caught the light. She touched it gently, then whispered, "We did it. We finished your last build." The house was silent, but it didn't feel empty. It felt full, full of love and loss and legacy, full of the man who'd built the foundation and the people who'd raised the walls. Jennifer walked to the workshop and hung the measuring tape on the wall, right beside David's old toolbox. Someday, she'd use it to help a family who needed a wheelchair ramp. Someday, Lily would use it to build something of her own. Someday, it would be covered in marks, dozens, hundreds, each one a life touched, a promise kept, a nail driven true. But tonight, it was enough to know that David's legacy wasn't ending. It was just beginning, and she was part of it now. They all were. 6 months later, Jennifer stood in the workshop watching Lily measure a piece of wood. "Careful with the pencil mark," she said. "Measure twice, cut once." Lily nodded seriously, her tongue poking out in concentration, just like David used to do. Outside, Robert was teaching a group of teenagers how to frame a wall. The sound of hammers and laughter drifted through the open door. They'd started the foundation 3 months ago. The David Hayes Foundation, building futures, one family at a time. So far, they'd repaired 4 roofs, built 2 wheelchair ramps, renovated a kitchen for a single father with twins. Each project got a mark on the measuring tape. Each family got a photo on the wall. Jennifer walked to where the tape hung, running her fingers over the marks. David's families, Robert's forgiveness, her home, Lily's tribute. And now, new names, new stories, new lives touched. The tape was filling up, just like David had planned. She touched the ring on her finger, his ring, and smiled. "Mom," Lily called, "is this right?" Jennifer turned. Her daughter held up the board, perfectly measured. "That's perfect, sweetheart." Through the window, she could see the house they'd built, the one David had started, the one they'd finished together. Sunlight caught the windows, turning them gold. It looked like hope. It looked like home. Jennifer thought about that morning at the storage unit, standing in front of Unit 247, terrified of what she'd find. She'd been looking for answers. What she'd found was a map, not to the past, but to the future. David hadn't left her secrets. He'd left her a foundation. And on that foundation, she'd built something beautiful. Something that would last long after all of them were gone. Because that's what love does. It builds, one nail at a time.